As you are all probably well aware of by now, when analog horror manages to break outside the norms and show you something refreshing, it's able to show off that we've barely scratched the surface when it comes to stories that can be told. Just about every day I get recommendations for analog horror to check out, but it can be difficult when some of them all blend together with the designs and the type of monsters being used. However, I got sent a message the other day to check out this relatively unknown analog horror series, Sins of the Past. Now, I have no idea what to expect going into this, but the quick glimpses I have seen reassured me that this is going to be a worthwhile experience. My initial thoughts were that this reminded me of the Walton Files, where the design took on more of an early 2D arcade style with its characters and just how the story was presented. I'm glad to see this style appear again, as I think it does a good job at ruining your childhood. I'm sure there are plenty of arcade-style horror content out there, I just have to find them. But unfortunately, I am unsure how to warn you in terms of protection needed for this series, so let's make sure all the lights are off, the volumes are up, and might as well keep your front door unlocked. Gotta stay extra safe in times like this. But before I let you get too far, just wanted to say if you're new here and enjoy what you're watching, be sure to hit all those neat buttons down below, including the subscribe and bell notification so you can be a part of every new upload. Also, real quick, just wanted to mention that as of this moment, me and some others are going to be at Phoenix Fan Fusion all 3 days, May 24th through the 26th. Not affiliated with the event in any ways, just going to have a fun time, so if any of you already have tickets or are planning on it, you might see some familiar faces. There will more than likely be more info and details as the convention gets closer, but anyways, now you can pass through. Interference, Entry 1. We are set on February 20th, 1977. Shown at first is a preview with a blurry video shown underneath, and we are informed at the bottom that large portions of this footage have been tampered with, or in some instances, deleted altogether. Therefore, it's told up front that we are probably not going to understand what is being seen, given that key context is missing. I doubt this is due to missing context, but I can't for the life of me understand what this guy's voice says at the very beginning of his sentence.
So I pick one body part, and I find out anything I want to know about it.
As of this instance, to me, it sounds like he is saying if he picks one body part, he can find out anything he wants to know about it. Don't make fun of me if I'm wrong, that's all I could make out. But perhaps my assumption isn't too far off considering what we are presented with next.
You should know her very well. Why don't we take a walk together? Just you and I. Down Charlotte's Hall of Dreams.
At this moment, it appears we are looking at a father and his infant daughter as he is trying to investigate her mind so that he can figure out who is controlling her dreams. It sounds like the voice that responds back to him is the initial you that our character is referring to, and this mysterious voice tells our father character that they know his daughter very well, and that they together are going to walk down Charlotte's Hall of Dreams. So it sounds like we have a dream menace that seems to be torturing and haunting this child. We need to remember that we also are being presented footage with a lot of important context stripped out. I'm sure the point is to be really confused, as we kinda got dropped in on this insane situation. Something to mention as well is that the closed captioning appears to also include some hidden messages needed to piece the mystery together. When the image of the baby and the supposed father's hand is reaching out, the caption reads Bill, Settle, and King. I imagine Bill Settle is the male voice we hear speak at first, to which perhaps the King is the more dreamlike voice that guides Bill into your dreams. If you somehow didn't catch the content warning at the beginning, you might want to look out for this next scene if audible child death isn't something you like hearing. We get a pixelated image of who I can only imagine is a young girl, with text on the bottom that types out, "Please wait." I can't imagine this girl to be Charlotte, because if I'm correct, Charlotte would be the baby whose mind we are trying to dig through. After we wait long enough looking at this image, we get presented with something that got me a little more than it should have.
Please don't kill me.
After we get through that traumatizing segment, we are presented with the footage that was being previewed to us at the very beginning, and the captions notify us that this is Charlotte Settle's dreams. I absolutely love this idea so far. The way the dreams are visualized is so unbelievably cool because whenever I think about early stages of dream projecting, I imagine it would come out like this poorly rendered but somewhat recognizable image. I have had some wild dreams, and it depresses me that I am unable to show off to all my friends exactly how it went down. But enough fantasizing. I am incredibly curious to see how this plays out. I can only guess the gray text at the bottom to be Bill Settle talking. He refers to the objects around him as props and questions if they are even real. This might be some indicator as to how this dream projection works. But hopefully all that missing context will be filled in later. White text appears that I presume is the other voice that spoke at the beginning, poking in and telling Bill to check his pockets. Just like a game's inventory system, a little flashlight appears in the middle of the screen. I revoke my statement on the white text being the other voice because it appears Bill doesn't recognize it. This is all to assume the gray text at the bottom is in fact Bill. It also looks as if Bill sees the text as we do, just right in his eyes. He doesn't seem too happy at the fact that the voice seems reluctant to respond to anything he asks. Bill equips the flashlight and turns it on, to which it prompts the voice to tell him to try shining it around. The light moves over to the left, and Bill makes mention of the fact that the light picks up sound. The text then hints to Bill to try looking behind him. He turns around and there's just an empty void, as if just the point to which the world doesn't project. As if staring into the void wasn't bad enough, Bill shines his flashlight and looks around some more. When he shines his light over to the top right, we begin to hear birds chirping, and then quickly red text appears talking about how a signal has been identified, and it sounds like we are being transported. We get a little transition image of the same girl from the beginning, probably not Charlotte as the birds we heard before flap around her. The next place we are taken to appears to be some sort of casino. Fortunately for us, we finally get a potential identity for the girl who keeps appearing, as Bill questions if who he saw was Tia. The presence of this Tia character seems to startle Bill, and he lets us know that he can't handle another dream like this again. Perhaps Tia is a close figure to Bill and something tragic happened to her, to which the event haunts Bill to this day. After Bill says that he needs to wake up, he is presented with red text that even the captions admit are unintelligible. But if I had to guess based on Bill's responses, the text is trying to convince him to stay in this dream world and to not wake up, kind of swaying the idea around that Bill doesn't want to find out the truth about whatever it is he's trying to figure out. After Bill lays out that it's hard knowing he could have done something to prevent it, the text tells him, then keep going. Bill proceeds further down the casino before stumbling upon an item on the ground. He picks it up and it appears to be a township card. He stuffs it away for later before turning around. Once he does, however, he is met with yet another black void. However, this time, one of the group of games gets taken out of the picture, and we see this red portal-looking thing of some sort floating in the middle. Before doing anything else, Bill pulls out the ID he had just picked up to see if it would have any effect on this vortex. Once he pulls it out, however, it looks like a wave of static comes flooding out, completely taking over the screen. In the midst of the static void, we are presented with a message from the red text. All it says is, "Your father will wake up soon, so I'll leave you with one last gift." I imagine that what we see next is the gift, to which I would like the receipt to return it.
You're gonna die too, aren't you? I can feel it.
As this little message plays on, it appears that Tia has her hands around this rose. This act gets more red text at the bottom congratulating her for finding the rose. The next bit of text we get threw me for a bit of a loop. From what I can make out, the text asks, "How do you feel?" after learning about Tia. The text then says, "Your dad is coming over. Until next time." As of right now, the series is still in the guessing game portion, so I must allow myself to be confused at this moment, as I can't imagine anyone is supposed to know what's going on right now. However, after that segment ends, we are shown something that the captions might have warned us about. The king is gone, and then we are presented with this weird image to represent this other group. The message that then appears at the bottom, however, is truly something to focus on. Earlier, you talked about who was controlling the dreams with him, yes? Do you get it now, Bill? I hope Bill has it under control, because I sure don't get it. That question doesn't seem to be getting any answers soon, because our next scene has us looking at an old television, with some strange tape being played off it. Before showing you this tape, just know it looks like something they would play on repeat to torture and or brainwash somebody.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to you.
Once the subliminal messages are over, we are met with an audio excerpt that includes Tia Settle talking about her sister. It's revealed here that Charlotte and Tia are also obviously sisters, and that perhaps Charlotte is the older one in this instance. Tia explains that she and her sister had a silly little argument. Basically, Tia feels like she is not necessarily overshadowed by her sister, but she can't do anything on her own without help from her. This can obviously make Tia believe that she is incapable of doing anything without someone else, and that just isn't fun, because we all need at least a bit of our independency intact. Now the real question is, who is Tia talking to? Is she just recording herself having a rant? Her statement at the end apologizing that they didn't need to hear all that has me thinking she was actually communicating with something. The TV goes to black and we see white text that just says, "Fun, right?" Not fun, no, but thank you for asking. The next segment we get dates us on February 1st, 1977, and this appears to be some screen where whoever is speaking is trying to convince whoever it's talking to stay dreaming, saying that we've suffered enough and that we are unable to bring things from the dream into reality, and so why even bother leaving? We are then presented with a choice: to stop dreaming or to continue it. The option to continue is what gets selected, and the caption at the bottom tells us that Charlotte makes the wrong choice. I couldn't be more curious as to where the series could possibly take us next. But as of right now, it appears we are following the Settle family, or perhaps there was an accident with Tia resulting in a bit of a family torment. It's possible that Charlotte was going into dreams to try and reconnect with Tia, or just to try and escape, and somehow someway the dream world decided to convince her that she should stay. This could be what Bill was talking about at the start, about trying to figure out who is controlling his daughter's dreams. Perhaps he is talking about the entity or person that has her convinced to keep dreaming. This is all pure speculation because, as we all know, stuff was probably taken out of context with the intent to confuse us, and I plan on figuring out all that's going on here. Township. Entry 2. This one right away really takes me back with that old Windows XP dashboard. They open up a folder labeled Cold Cases, and then try to open up another folder within labeled Windsor... Oh yeah, I don't know how to pronounce that. Windsor, okay. And then try to open up another file within labeled Windsor Disappearances. They ignore the virus warning that he gets when attempting to open it and goes in anyway. Under the folder labeled Township, they open a text file named Final Takeaway, which reads that Township has little to do with the disappearances in Windsor. It is unlikely that there is a larger conspiracy at play when it comes to this company. Please direct all efforts towards frequent visitors of their locations. Thank you. The profile our person logged in on is under Agent Millie, and it appears this person is going about an investigation on frequent missing people, and it appears Township was a suspect of some foul play. This final takeaway reads like a last response from Township trying to decline any involvement and steer their attention elsewhere. Clearly not convinced, our character, who I'll just refer to as Millie, goes into Firefox and heads to the homepage of Township. While the text on the front page is almost impossible to read, just darkening the image up brought those words right out. The first paragraph doesn't have anything too telling, just saying if you are unsure as to what Township even is, then to just head to the About Us section. But the second paragraph is where things get interesting. This website is our attempt to modernize ourselves in the ever-changing world of technology and entertainment. After several blows to our company, because of baseless rumors and concerns, we've been forced to step our foot into any entertainment to keep our branding and your entertainment alive. Sounds like Township is no stranger to controversy. You also get this really creepy background music on the homepage.
By the sea, by the sea, by the beautiful sea.
When Millie clicks on the news tab at the top, it just takes them to a page that says nothing new yet. And then, we didn't know you were a fan of football, Ruthie. Who is Ruthie exactly? When we click on the rope button to the side, we are met with this weird cartoon triangle looking up at a rope, with text asking us if we are going to make him climb this rope, and that the choice is yours. However, once trying to make him climb, it claims that it'll be too difficult, seeing as how he lacks arms. I guess that makes sense. Oddly enough, there's another button to the side just labeled Smoking. You aren't really greeted with a nice page after clicking on it, however. Millie heads on over to the Contact page, where the paragraph basically tells us that if we have any issues, the modern day has made it easier and easier for Township and the person on the site to communicate. To which Millie opens up the text chat at the bottom, and begins to have a conversation with the person on the other end. Millie seems surprised to find someone still online. The response from the other end is a little mysterious. They let us know that they just require basic information from us, but under the name spot, there is already text that reads either the site is sad or the site is bad. Either way, it's probably not good. Millie calls us out, and the Township employee says it's just something the chat does every time as like a bug. Our employee later tells us that the job has sort of turned dead end, with the company unlikely to last for the next year or so. He says that the events in Windsor took a big hit on the company and it is probably not going to recover. Millie tells him that that is exactly what they are trying to investigate. However, when asked if they are with the police, they respond with, "You could say that, yes." It's likely this person is either above the police or just doing some private investigating. Our employee says that the company has never been open about their intentions. Even though he doesn't think they had anything to do with the Windsor disappearances, he still thinks it's worth looking into. When asked to clarify about his comment on their intentions, he doesn't really let the guy answer before he quits out of the chat to do some more exploring. After going back to the homepage, Millie opens up the Player of the Week. The current Player of the Week seems to actually be Charlotte. This looks to be a place where people were able to vote on someone based on skill to be the Player of the Week. Millie goes further and hits the Make a Request button and is taken to a whole new page. The first link shown is labeled, "What is an Umbra?" I can tell you right now after a quick search that it looks to be the Latin translation for shadow, but I have a feeling that's not where this is going. This page is a bit of an info dump, so bear with me. Umbras, as far as we can tell, are an explanation for a majority of paranormal sightings reported throughout history. Whether it be demons, spirits, ghosts, as far as we can tell, they explain most of them. Even the most far-fetched concepts. An umbra, as far as we can discern, is simply an entity that is obsessed with the idea of evolution and perfection, whether consciously or unconsciously. In every case we have seen so far, this obsession with perfection has been physical. Umbras tend to stick to one object or sometimes even concepts after their human death. What's most common from what we have gathered is an object valuable to them close to their place of death. A family relic, a gift to them from somebody dear, things like that. When upgrading, they tend to use objects around whatever they possessed to the best of their ability. If they died around wood, the forms or stages that they take on begin to look very wood or tree-like. If they died in the snow, snow-like, so on and so forth. Attempting to construct a perfect form, more humanoid. But could there possibly be other forms of upgrading? Whoa, that's a load of information right there. So from what I can gather, umbras are basically ghosts. As in, once you die, your next form begins to try and evolve into something close to them. In most cases, it's things that were near them during death. Is this what happens to everyone after death, or just a certain few? It also appears that this raises the question on if they can upgrade into something different, or perhaps upgrade using a different method. However, not too long before being on this page, our employee is quick to ask us what page we have landed ourselves on. He is able to tell he is on the Umbra page, but the employee isn't able to access it himself. Now with the two working together, Millie has the employee on standby in case anything crazy goes down. When Millie tries to open up the person of interest page, it prompts him with a login screen. This is made even more strange after an employee says that the website doesn't even have profiles. Even so, they go through the archives to see if there are any more users. He comes back with an email and a password. His explanation is that at some point in time, there were things on the site that just never ended up getting finished, things like online games and such that required logins. After a successful login, we are then met with this strange page. At the bottom we see an image of Charlotte labeled as us, and at the bottom we see Tia as her sister. This page seems to be some area where you can log people that are close to you and exchange info. I'm not too sure how to really explain this page as I myself don't really understand it. When Millie tries to ask the employee a question about Charlotte, the employee states that he doesn't have a clue who that is. When Millie clicks on Charlotte's name, it brings up this bio of some sorts, except it doesn't appear to be written by her, but someone else. Is this an automated system that kind of calculates using computer math how your behavior is and gives you a personality synopsis? That's the only thing I can really think of at the moment. The description of Charlotte is a bit of an interesting read, however. Tall, loud, annoying. Charlotte appeared to be extremely short-tempered with little patience for anyone, including her own friends. She could be comfortably placed within the bully stereotype you often only see in cheesy movies. Except it was rare for her to be stopped by some courageous hero main protagonist. She was often seen in the arcade nearest to her, or caring for her little sister Tia. Despite her rude demeanor and way of going about things, Charlotte found little comfort in doing anything that wasn't helping her friends and family achieve what she believed to be their purpose. Perhaps it was because of her own lack of one. Yeah, I don't think Charlotte wrote this. After reading the bio of Charlotte, we move on to read Tia's. Tia Settle was a rather on-the-whim person. Very little stayed consistent about her during her life other than her dream to one day be an actress, something that Charlotte Settle undoubtedly played a huge role in building up before Tia's unfortunate passing. Based on Charlotte's dream, it would appear her killer lured her in with the promises of working towards her acting dreams without the help of Charlotte. It's likely that Tia was very insecure in her own ability to do things, doubled by her visual impairment. It was known she was bullied or generally disregarded in her class. Alright, so this is leading me to believe that Township is somewhere from this company that has developed the technology to look into your dreams and visualize them. And I believe that these little bios are all the systems making an analysis based on the dreams the person is having. How else would it know anything based on Charlotte's dreams unless she was communicating them? It's also clear that Tia did end up going towards that negative reaction I was predicting earlier, where she needed independence and she unfortunately trusted the wrong person who promised her the very thing. Once we exit out of Tia's bio, however, we are shown a more familiar name, Ruthie. Ruthie is labeled under Your Love. Very interesting. Ruthie's bio might be the most shocking of them all. Ruthie appears to have the more traumatic past of the whole friend group. It's unknown what happened to her. We know that her brother King killed their two parents before finally succumbing to a shot to the head administered by Ruthie. Her family had quite the inheritance to leave behind, and yet Ruthie has touched almost none of it. It appears that she liked to spend any money she did on odd clothing combinations. Quiet, patient, and quite easy to push around, Ruthie is nothing like her partner. Ruthie's brother being named King is quite the shocking revelation. Granted, the only time we have heard any previous mentions of King is at the very beginning when we see the baby, and then near the end of the first entry when it says the king is gone. While I don't see the connection just yet as to how King fits into this whole thing, it's clear he is going to have a much bigger part to play in this coming entries. Millie leaves Ruthie's page and heads back to Tia's, to which they go down and click on the little photo down to the left. The next image that opens up is who I can only imagine to be Tia, surrounded and covered in blood. When Millie clicks on her head, we are brought to this video that I don't think would sit right with anyone. What does this mysterious text mean exactly when it says, "You did this, Charlotte"? I imagine the idea of these two unfortunate fates intertwining would be about Charlotte and Tia. Is this trying to conclude that Charlotte could have had something to do with Tia's disappearance? Right now I don't really think so, but you never know where this could go. The video ends with more creepy imagery and a voice in the background. After the video cuts out, we are shown a bit more messages between Millie and the employee we hadn't seen before. He asks if Township, being very community-centered, had ever made a video game centered around town residents, to which the employee responds with, "Yeah, that was a pretty common thing." Is he talking about a game like The Sims, or if there was a Sims-based game on a real actual person in your community? Because that being a common thing totally isn't scary at all. Millie tries to ask the employee what video it is they had just watched, to which they aren't met with an answer. Millie lets them know that they will be back on tomorrow, to which they exit out of the site and delete the files. They go on to turn off the computer, but something seems to be waiting with a message. At the very end, we see that the webcam had been activated, and text then appears that just says, "You are not Charlotte. Do not try to investigate this again." The end of this entry leaves us off with a long but interesting message to conclude on. Will a scared rabbit clinging to a wolf ever have a good conclusion? The snowbird that landed its wings so gracefully on the wolf is gone. The bear that offered such love for this wolf ultimately led to the same fate as the poor snowbird. And yet the young rabbit still clings, finding itself belonging nowhere else, until even the wolf, the ruiner of all, finds itself a new home for the young rabbit, and eventually, the wolf lets its unbreakable guard down, allowing itself to find solace in the rabbit as well. I have a feeling this is going to heavily reflect on the story between Tia and Charlotte, as it appears their relationship may be the core basis of this series. Clarity. Entry 3. I will say the name of this entry has me excited to possibly get some answers. This entry begins with the curtains being pulled back, as if a play is about to begin. We are introduced to the little pixelated character who I can only imagine represents Tia. She puts together pretty quickly that the people she is talking to are really curious to know what happened on that day. I gotta say, the way this episode sets up its backstory is actually really cool. The fact that it's Tia kinda taking this through the staged version of her past. She even makes mention that she didn't have a lot of time to replicate the kitchen. Now I suppose this could all be taken as metaphorical, and this is all just a stylized way of telling us this tale, except I feel this could be a more literal scenario. It seems like this imagery is being presented to us through what memories Tia has. From what I can gather, it appears Charlotte comes out to wake Tia up and attempt to get her ready. Tia, letting it known already she doesn't like feeling as if she needs Charlotte for anything, rushes off in a hurry and tries to ignore her. It appears Tia runs into her theater class of some sorts, but runs too fast and she runs into the wall. It's pretty obvious here that Tia has a rough time in school. We read about this in her bio, but we now have to actually bear witness to it. One person even points out that they can laugh because her sister isn't there to stop them, clearly showing the dynamic these two found themselves in at school. After a little more silly dream stage play antics, the scene continues on and we see more of the issues Tia had to deal with. It appears that Tia tries to leave, but whoever this blonde asshole is has some shit to say. Kurt tries to intervene, but this blonde lady just seems to want to make Tia's life a living hell, basically doing classic bully behavior and should probably get thrown in front of a moving train. The next scene might give us a clear answer as to who was the cause of Tia's disappearance. We see text of presumably Tia begging for her life, asking to see Charlotte, and questioning what she ever did to the evil blonde lady dragging her across. She gets dragged all the way out into the woods before it looks like the blonde menace finishes the job. We cut to black, and our next scene completely wipes away the clarity I was just provided in the previous scene. We see this bright red looking kitchen area. The vision is pretty skewed, almost similar to the way the dreams are presented. The text below just says I've been walking around thinking for hours and hours, and the TV buzzing in the background isn't helping the headache. I believe the numbers on the top left to be a date of some sorts, but the last number trumps me there. The person talking gets an idea to call Ruthie. This might tell us that this is Charlotte we are in the eyes of. Why she is seeing this sort of way I am unsure, but she calls Ruthie worried about the fact that she has been unable to find Tia. Charlotte asks Ruthie if Tia had gone to her house the night before. She explains that her and Tia got into a heated argument resulting in Tia storming off, to which Charlotte hasn't seen her since. She also makes mention that she is extra worried considering Tia has an inability to see. I believe this was mentioned in her bio, but it wasn't clear the level of inability she had. Was she fully blind, or was it just classic blurry? Ruthie suggests that Tia might have gone over to Jay's house. Who this Jay is, who knows? But Charlotte makes it pretty clear that Tia wouldn't go to Jay, as she doesn't like him really at all. However, while they are having this conversation, we can see some illustrations being presented in the background. It looks like a trash bag before cutting to the woods, before getting another look at what to me looks pretty close to a body bag. I really like how the series so far has gone all in on the dreamlike aesthetic. The fact that when certain things get mentioned, a visualization gets brought to the screen, or even later when they are mentioning certain names, they begin to float and appear on the screen. Basically trying to represent our inner consciousness and just the way we visualize our thoughts in our own heads. I don't think I've really ever seen this done so well before. I feel like if dream projections become a reality, this is exactly what it's going to look like. As the conversation continues, we hear from Charlotte that at the time, her parents were out having a date night. She also makes mention of the fact that her dad had been acting really out of it for some reason. The words Tia and Harmony float across the screen before this conversation ends. We cut back to presumably Charlotte's perspective, and the date is February 6th, 1976. We stare off into the same bright red kitchen as before, except this time we are met with these strange raspy breaths in the background, before turning around and hearing the sounds at full force. This scene makes me think of those moments of trying to run away in a dream, but as always, your feet don't seem to want to take you anywhere. Just like last time, if you somehow missed the content warning at the beginning, this is once again going back into some pretty heavy stuff, so just forewarning. We cut to this image that is labeled Harmony's room. Harmony, I don't think has been properly introduced yet, so I am not too sure who this could be. However, right in the middle of the room, it's clear a lady has hung herself. After the horrific pop, we are met with text where a lot of it is cut out, making this hard to really contextualize. It also isn't clear who is speaking at this moment. All we can make out is that they stared at the cold dead feet for hours. After calling for help, whoever came chalked it down to a suicide due to losing her youngest child. It goes on to say something about Charlotte and the teddy bear. It also appears this person is blaming Charlotte for what happened to Tia, and something about a Nina character as well. In the captions, we also see text that just reads, "Mom, what did you see at the arcade?" As of right now, I think it's safe to say that Harmony may be the mother to Tia and Charlotte, who tragically ended her life after being unable to cope with the news. After that segment, it appears we then get to listen in on an interrogation between an officer and Charlotte. It begins like a normal recording, before I believe something or someone takes over to present it in more of an artistic sense. From what it looks like, Charlotte isn't a big fan of being a suspect and isn't being very cooperative with the police. The officer questioning her makes the big accusation that Charlotte had killed not only Tia, but also someone named Nina. Charlotte continues to deny the idea that she has killed anyone. However, once the officers threaten to drop the case entirely, Charlotte gives in and tells them the story. The story, however, isn't very different than the one she told Ruthie, saying that she and Tia had an argument about independence, then Tia storms off and Charlotte never sees her again. Supposedly, the argument had started after it was clear Tia had been beaten up at school. Tia was also not happy about the fact that Charlotte was trying to get the names out of her. What's interesting is after Charlotte tells the officer she stormed off and never saw her again, the scene dismantles and the argument between the officer and Charlotte looks to become more intense. Perhaps this is to symbolize that Charlotte isn't being truthful, and that it's pissing off whatever force wants the truth. However, the next bit of text may lead me to believe Charlotte in fact didn't have anything to do with the murders. In the captions, we read, "In the same room my father killed you, Tia." Whose father is this text referring to, I wonder? After the screen cuts to black, we are presented with an Act 2, with the captions labeled as Old Old. What comes next is a little odd, so I'll just let you see for yourself. This looks to be some odd visualization of insomnia presented with some video that I believe could be for help getting sleep. Perhaps this is the first thing you see when you're entering into that weird dream state. Once we go in further, we cut to this projection of an old television and an outline of a young girl watching it. The TV flashed on and showed text that is a reverse of perspective shift, to which then it flips back around so we can actually read it. It appears that what is getting presented to us next is called Harmony's Judgment. As of right now, it's still believed that Harmony is the mother of Charlotte and Tia. A new pixelated character comes onto the screen. They do say that they are going to show us something nice. What we do see is this weird pixelated image, but if I had to guess, it kind of looks like a girl at school. Perhaps Tia? We are then brought to this old computer screen that resembles those old games where you have to type your name in. The name that gets typed in is Harmony. However, it quickly changes to Lewis, and the scene we get next may play a big part in figuring out Tia's murder.
I should have asked Lottie or her friends for help after all.
It appears like this is the event of Tia's murder, and we are looking through the perspective of someone named Lewis. Mr. Lewis, to be precise, as said by Tia, leading me to believe he is potentially a teacher of hers. He asks her what she is doing out without Charlotte, to which Tia explains the argument they had to him. Lewis then says that they can talk about it in the bathroom. Tia's response, however, is quite interesting. She asks, isn't that the place Nina died, before cutting herself off and then us getting cut off with white text coming onto the center of the screen. Whoever this text is doesn't have much time left. The next thing we see is unfortunately Tia looking pretty murdered as Lewis looks over her. He is then presented the question, will you do as promised? He selects yes, and then text gets prompted up that just says, did that feel good? You'll kill her. After all that, we get a game over screen and it sounds like Charlotte can be heard in the background crying, asking why she is the one who has to deal with it all, and what it is she is being shown. We cut back to that eerie visual of the little girl in front of the TV. As we zoom in closer and closer, the pixelated character who narrated Harmony's judgment comes back with the teddy bear and congratulates us for finding him. Needless to say, this entry being named Clarity was both true and untrue. Even the description warns us of this. Sometimes clarity after an interference can be a blessing. Other times it feels like a sack full of info being slammed against your head, over and over and over again. Yeah, that sums up this entry pretty well, even though it managed to do both. We got somewhat more clarification on the murder of Tia. Kind of. It appears at first that the bully blonde lady is the one who dragged her out into the woods. It's likely now more than ever that she wasn't the one who killed her. It sounds like Tia and Charlotte were having a rough day from the very start. It gets even worse for Tia when the blonde lady starts making fun of her and just hassles her out of the building. Turns out she didn't do just that, but she takes Tia out into the woods like a menace and beats the shit out of her. She comes home looking all beat up and won't tell Charlotte who did it, sparking the second argument of the day, which results in Tia storming off, going to the arcade. She meets Mr. Lewis, who had killed Nina, and he is now luring Tia into the back room to kill her too, to which Harmony, the mother, goes to the arcade to look for her, finds the bodies. Unable to cope with what she saw, goes home and takes her own life. That's the timeline of events that I believe have occurred so far, but there are still 4 more entries to cover, so I can only imagine this mystery is far from over. Weird. Entry 4. This entry begins and it appears we are getting an inside look into Charlotte's journal. Hopefully this can lead us to figuring out some more details. The first entry is set on February 6th, 1976, the same day we were viewing Charlotte's perspective in the bright red kitchen. It read that the detective Mom hired went missing. I hope him and Tia are safe, wherever they are. Is the detective that the mom hired the person we were following on Agent Millie's account on the computer? That would only mean that anything on the computer also attacked the detective, if those two are connected. After the screen glitches out, we are presented with footage that looks like someone walking through a snowy forest. Cutting off of that, we are on Christmas Day of '76. Ruthie gave me a bow for my hair today. I think I'll tell her how I truly feel soon, even if I'm like super freaked out. The next journal entry is a day after, and it reads that I found out what happened to Ruthie's family today, likely referring to the incident with her brother King. It looks like we are then taken to this oddly looking interior with a floor that's covered in blood. Soon a hand comes into view and picks an item up off the floor. It's unclear what the item is, but it's possible it's this entry that is dated for January 15th, 1977, and just reads, "Charlotte broke her promise today." What's frightening about this sentence is the last time someone supposedly had to follow through with a promise, it resulted in Tia's murder. Is it possible that this township game, the one where you play out the lives of actual residents, acts as this story you play out that is then destined to happen? The only reason I mention this is A, because the visualization of Tia's murder was in game form, and B, the text at the bottom says, "You'll kill her," presumably after he already did. Unless he only did it in-game, and was then planning to commit the atrocity in reality. Beginnings. Entry 5. Again, content warning. This entry starts off on a pretty tragic sight where it appears we are looking through Tia's perspective, as she is being dragged away by Lewis. This leads me to question exactly what Harmony saw at the arcade. At first it seemed like she would have seen Nina and Tina, but if she only saw Nina, then perhaps Harmony isn't the mother of Charlotte and Tia, but of Nina instead. It's not concrete yet, but that happenstance might be what changes her story. The next scene looks like we are brought down into an open grave, about to be met with one of the worst fates imaginable. The following scene appears to show Tia climbing out of her grave, but I can't be certain who or where the voice is coming from.
You promised me that we'd live forever. Together. Now, if you really wanted to do that, just give up on that stupid thought of yours.
After all that, we are taken to the date of September 14th, 1975, where Jay, Ruthie, Charlotte, and Nina are all having a party together. They all talk amongst themselves before Charlotte proposes the idea to play Truth or Dare. Ruthie isn't a fan, but Nina decides to agree. After some lighthearted dares, Nina calls Charlotte out for her hidden feelings for Ruthie. This upsets Charlotte as she clearly gets embarrassed and denies it. But as retaliation, Charlotte dares Nina to lock herself in the back room for 30 minutes in the dark. This does not make things look good for Nina, as that was the location her dead body was found. However, the two events don't seem to be related at this moment. What we see next is what looks like one of our characters falling from great height and smacking into something, before a figure dressed in white comes out and tells us that they won't show us what happened after the dare, but they'll show us something else. Perhaps this is to imply that the events were indeed actually related, but this makes Nina's death seem more like a tragic accident, unless Lewis was involved in both attacks. We are warned, just like in the beginning, that what we are about to see is not going to make any sense, except this time we should blame Charlotte for that. The date lands on December 26th, 1976. The last event to happen on this day would have been when Charlotte says she found out about Ruthie's family. The footage that plays out looks to be another game being played. As the character goes on this path, they are met with creepy figures and monsters along the way. Not that they seem necessarily harmful, most seem confused in whatever place this is. However, once our character gets to the very end of the path, they are met with a giant cage, to which a very large figure stands up from within and asks our character to identify themselves. Turns out it's Charlotte whom we are following, and she gets rightfully startled by the large figure. To Charlotte's surprise, the figure in the cage can hear what she says, and directly responds to her. The creature ends up asking for Charlotte's name, and when she asks for his answer left me quite shocked.
My name's Charlotte, big man. What's your name?
Charlotte? It is a lovely name. My name, it was King, I suppose. My parents named me that as the one who would conquer my weaknesses, and theirs, as they put it.
King. You've got a cool name too.
King goes on to explain very little bit about his past, and explains how he has consistent trouble explaining to others exactly what he is. But now the tables have turned, and King is asking Charlotte the questions. After asking Charlotte if she knows who Ruthie is, she answers with the fact that Ruthie is her best friend, to which the idea of which pleases the King. The King explains that he is trapped in the cage, to which Charlotte asks if there is any way for him to be freed. This alerts the King that Charlotte has yet to learn of Ruthie's past, and rather than tell her the story, he decides to show her. As King tells the story, he describes Ruthie as a pain to deal with due to her crippling anxiety, and goes on to explain that even a raised hand would send her crying. However, one night, Ruthie's parents never went upstairs to tell her goodnight, which made her believe something was terribly wrong. Unfortunately for her, she would be right. After flicking on the lights, we are met with quite the horrific scene. Both of Ruthie's parents lay in a puddle of blood on the floor. When King comes downstairs, Ruthie runs to him for safety before seeing that he is the one holding the bloody knife. Ruthie was still hopeful that it wasn't King, and even quickly asks if he killed the man who actually did it. But when King steps closer towards her, she has to be incredibly quick when presented with her next 3 options. Either she can hold a mirror up to shamefully look at herself as she dies, she can put on the bow and look pretty while she dies, or she can defend herself. Unlike what was previously believed, where Ruthie shoots King in the head, it appears she actually used a knife to finish the job. Charlotte appears to get knocked out after being pulled out of the story, and we cut to January 15th, 1977. On this day, it appears Charlotte, Jay, and Ruthie are all hanging out together to play a new game. Charlotte makes it a point to ask how Ruthie is, considering she is now aware of the incident. However, before too much else can happen after, the 3 of them appear to be knocked out by a horrific figure that kidnaps all of them and takes them away through the snow. The next segment we are presented with is a little strange. Dreams in the back of the car, because why not have a dream while you're being kidnapped? The first thing we are met with in this dream state is Jay asking out Charlotte, to which a boulder comes crashing down on her. This could have been an actual event, just exaggerated to show how she felt inside, or just a fear she has. However, Charlotte ends up in this weird black void space, where text appears saying, "Come and fight me, God." This honestly sounds like something she would scream out before death. Even so, a giant fan comes down and blows her away. After all that, we see Charlotte facing one of those red vortexes we saw at the very beginning, before the assailant comes from behind and drags her into another room. Jay and Ruthie wake up, but Charlotte is still out. When Jay tries to intervene, our menace makes a very serious threat. Ruthie rightfully starts to get freaked out as the menace starts to mock them. It appears the goal of this masked crazy guy is to have them partake in a game. The game isn't very hard to understand, however. He just wants to see Jay kill Ruthie, to which Charlotte will then be let free along with Jay. Jay tries to devise a plan to fake Ruthie's death. He picks up a rock and then immediately chucks it at the crazy guy, to which he pulls out a gun and shoots out. It doesn't appear to hit anyone, but this changes something in Jay, and he ends up going towards Ruthie, and inevitably beats her to death. Would this have anything to do with Jay's supposed feelings for Charlotte? He was willing to trade a life for hers. The bird-masked asshole laughs maniacally while various other scenes play out in the background, one of which is the blonde bully dragging Tia out into the woods. The red coat seems to match, but the hair doesn't. Did the guy throw on a wig to try and disguise himself? Not too sure, but I would imagine all the scenes being played out behind him are the actions he had committed. And if it's the same guy who was dragging Tia through the snow, then our culprit has to be Lewis. Lewis drops Charlotte and Jay off into the snow. Charlotte is aware that Jay killed Ruthie, and she isn't taking it well at all. I mean, how could she? I imagine if she truly had the strong feelings as she did, and was conscious, who knows the decisions she would have made. Charlotte is so upset that it looks as if killing Jay actively crosses her mind. From the looks of it, she just leaves Jay there and tries to make her way back. The next part is a little strange, since it looks like Charlotte starts to puke blood along her path, to which she rambles off nonsense and eats a rat. Unless this is a wounded Jay trying to make his way back home, but why would he eat a rat? The panting, however, sounds like it would be Charlotte. It looks like she manages to make it to a building where on the other side of it is a TV, and, well, I'll just let you see what happens.
You killed her. You killed her. You killed her.
It looks as if the king's sword came through the TV and attacked her, to which we are met with the king running directly at us. It appears he might have grabbed her and tried to pull her through. She gets shot out and looks to have had her face completely mangled up. This entry alone continues to answer some questions I had, while simultaneously adding a dozen more. The biggest question may lie in what exactly King is now. At the end of this entry, it looks as if he is capable of moving through screens. What is interesting, however, is only a couple weeks after this whole event takes place, we get our first entry, with Bill Settle traveling into Charlotte's dreams. Actually, that whole beginning tape makes a bit more sense now. Bill Settle, who is the father supposedly, managed to get into contact with King because he suspects him of being the one controlling her dreams. After supposedly realizing he's not, we see as they go together into her Hall of Dreams to explore, to which we don't really see anything else after. Hopefully the next handful of these short entries will clear the air a bit. Illusion of Choice, Entry 6. This entry begins, and if I'm being honest, it looks like we are inside a brain. Random red text starts to ramble while blue text comes and tells us to look behind us. In the dark void, there is a star floating in the middle. It gets highlighted and we are told that we don't have a choice, so to get it out of our heads. The text tells us that they will make us live, as we don't get to selfishly die here, and that we will know the truth. It's clear at this point that Lewis isn't the only menace in this series. A lot of our main cast periodically accuse Charlotte of being the one behind everything. A lot of the inconsistencies and confusing plot threads are blamed on Charlotte. You know, it's possible that this whole series takes place in Charlotte's mind as we go through her recollection of events to try and uncover the truth. The only issue is that it seems to have been proven that Charlotte isn't really a reliable narrator, and this is all how she perceived things. These could all be fabricated events designed to throw whoever is investigating off course. It does also say in the description that this is Charlotte Dream 1, January 15th, 1977, the day of the kidnapping. Memories or Dreams, Final Entry. The entry is labeled Charlotte's Dream 3 on January 21st, 1977. This entry appears to just show off some dream core imagery labeled with the memory it is associated with. What's interesting is that the transition to the next image is through these dream bubbles. So are we watching actual memories, or are we looking at dreams? From what I can recall, Charlotte and Ruthie never went on a date, so this would have to just be a dream. The final thing we leave off with is the question, memories or dreams? I believe that question may hold the secret as to the underlying mystery of the series. It's challenging the true difference. If, for instance, Bill Settle or whoever is trying to go through Charlotte's mind to get the true answers, it would be hard to find out if the visual they are seeing is just a fabricated memory, aka dream, or a real event. There is still the mystery behind the game Township, however, and what it was all about. All we really know is that it was a game company whose goal was to advance modern tech, but got blamed for the disappearances throughout Windsor. Not to say they aren't, but we truly don't know the extent of this technology. Clearly people are capable of entering dreams, it seems, as we saw in the beginning, unless it's more of a game projection of a dream. My theory is that everything kinda connects to these Umbras we learned about earlier. When Ruthie killed King, it's possible he evolved into one of these Umbras, upgrading in a sense. If it normally morphs you into something you were close with, it's possible that the thing is technology, or a game, you name it. King upgraded and morphed with this Township game, to which he then went on to go after the people he believed wronged him. As of right now, we have 3 potential menaces to point fingers at in this series: King, Charlotte, and Lewis. It's possible that King had a hold on Lewis. Is it starting to click now? And was able to manipulate him into doing things in the real world. I'm not sure entirely, but there has to be a connection to all 3 of them. If King was in fact this upgraded technological human hybrid, I don't believe it's too far-fetched to believe he was capable of yanking people in, which would explain the disappearances and the Township connection. While we don't have the full story uncovered yet, there is confirmed more stuff to come, so the story is far from over. I actually really loved what I saw so far from Sins of the Past. It takes you back to that childhood game aesthetic and uses it full force to tell its story. I can understand the perspective of this art style taking away from the scares, but for me it adds to it because you don't really see this horrific imagery laid out like an arcade game. This truly felt like we were being presented with a mainline narrative, and then the underlying narrative that we have to solve. With most analog horrors, at least in the early days, it seemed like there was really only an underlying narrative, where the various and unexplainable imagery and visuals were made to provide clues so that you could find the answers. This can be frustrating, I imagine, to people who don't want to have to do homework to understand what's happening. But with Sins of the Past, it felt like the best of both worlds, where the main story isn't too hard to follow along with, and the underlying mystery still lurks every now and then during certain scenes. They work to strengthen the other, because as you uncover the underlying mystery, your main narrative is going to get that much better. I highly recommend you guys check out Sins of the Past, as it truly was a work of art, and I think it truly understands the way to tell dreadful horror stories, and there's more to come. This really strived in its narrative and characters, which I think is the hardest part to get right with this. But that's going to be about it for this video. I thank you all for making it this far. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like and a subscribe, and I don't know about you, but I will be plugging a nightlight in tonight.